So we're just going to mix things up a little bit. And I'm going to first introduce our second keynote speaker. I think there's a lot of really good points and questions were raised in the last session, and of course this was all to be continued over the next weeks, months, and years, and we're very much looking forward to that. But in the meantime, to sort of shift a little bit, I'd like to introduce Paola Antonelli, who, in addition to being a very great friend, is one of the great innovators in design curating, having been, well, now she's senior curator of design and of architecture and design at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, as well as the director of their new R&D department, which is very exciting. At MoMA, Paola has curated quite a number of landmark shows, from Mutant Materials to Safe Design Takes on Risk to Design and the Elastic Mind, and most recently Talk to Me. So she's going to tell us, give us a brief overview of her take on new frontiers in design. Paola, please.
Thank you so much, Aric, for this introduction. And thank you to M+ for bringing me back to my beloved Hong Kong. Yes, after talking about Asian design, I would like to talk about something that instead I know something about, which is design in general. And I would like to talk about a big change that is sweeping the world of design, and which I hope, I'm sure actually, that Aric will take into account when he will build a collection together with Shirley and with Lars. What has changed in design is that design has become open, dynamic, and really much more attuned to society and to the real world. This is a slide that my friends Tony Dunn and Fiona Raby, that are really great designers and educators based in London and mostly with the Royal College of Art, used to show the difference between design as it was in yesteryears and design as it is now. Yes, take the picture of the slide, because I won't be able to read every single definition, but there are some parts that are particularly important. For instance, one is the change from problem solving, the old stereotype and definition of design, to problem finding. It's something that you might have heard before, also speaking about philosophers or scientists. It's very much an issue of today, not taking anything for granted, not just embarking in finding solutions, but rather making sure that the question that's being asked is the right one. And that's what designers do often today. And what they do also is they don't provide answers anymore, but they ask questions. And so on and so forth. If you look at these two columns, you see how design today is simply a much more open system. And design is critical today. There's actually a discipline that's called critical design, and I was telling you about Dunn and Raby. This is one of their most recent works. It's called Foragers, and as they always do, they start with a hypothesis about the future. In the future, there will be too many people on Earth. We will run out of food. We will need to do something about it. And what they did is they invented these completely experimental and speculative, of course, outsourced gastrointestinal systems that will allow us to go back to digesting roots, algae, leaves, things that we have not digested for many, many centuries, and that we're too delicate. We have no more appendix working. We're too delicate to digest on our own. So these ideas, they show with beautiful models and videos, and even with pictures of French students in the French countryside actually wearing the models and pretending they're eating algae. But so really, it's about making a statement about possible consequences of our wrong choices of today, and also providing a scenario that shows that it could be quite an extreme situation. It's about being convincing and communicative, and it's about being activist. A lot of design today is about activism, sometimes in kind of literal terms. This is the beautiful work by Ralph Borland, who's a South African designer. It's called Suited for Subversion, and it's a suit that you're supposed to wear when you go protest in the square, and it's going to protect you from the batons of the police, of course, this, but also it has a camera built on top of your head that's going to film the action just in case the police goes too far. And it has another great detail. It has a loudspeaker that amplifies your heartbeat and reminds the police that you are a human being. And if there's hundreds of you wearing the same suit, this collective heartbeat is going to become almost threatening. So it really is a multi-formed way to be activist. But now, moving from the facetious to the very serious, another way to be activist is to show things as they really are, but as they remained hidden because they were never shown with design. This is a graphic that shows a statistic in the United States. There are many cities in the United States where the government spends millions of dollars a year to keep people either in prison or in halfway houses outside of society. And there are certain blocks in cities in the United States where at least $1 million is spent. They're called $1 million blocks. And there are 350 of these blocks in Brooklyn, the borough of New York, alone. It's staggering. It's a measure of entropy and of waste of social funds without any kind of return. But if you read these figures in the newspaper in the morning, you're going to be outraged for 20 minutes and you're going to forget about it. Instead, if you see them red, blood red blocks over the black shape of Brooklyn, it's going to remain with you forever. So it's communication. Sometimes it's propaganda, it's manipulation, but it's about really making sure that the communication happens. And design today, good design needs to be communicative. Sometimes communication is about making sure that, once again, people understand what's going on. This is a website that's called BBC Dimensions that was designed by Berg in London that allows one to take something that happens elsewhere in the world. Right now, there's 125 miles of traffic jam in Russia, for instance. So you take that event, you type in your zip code, and then all of a sudden you can superimpose the event over your own city or state, so you can have a real sense of the magnitude and not just an abstract knowledge of it. And it's really very powerful. Sometimes communication is also something that used to be impossible. It's about communicating with God using contemporary technology. And in the last exhibition that we had at MoMA, we actually also acquired it in the collection. We had a prayer companion for Catholic nuns that are cloistered nuns. It gives them topics that come from Bloomberg News so they know what to pray about, and it's actually in use in a convent. And on this side, instead, you have El Sajada, which is a Muslim prayer mat that has embedded LED, electroluminescent LEDs, and the compass module, and it lights up when it's in the right direction with Mecca. Now, everybody knows where Mecca is, but it's the symbolic gesture. It's about taming technology towards religion and having technology help religion that matters. And in the similar way, the openness that design needs to have today to really be meaningful is another characteristic that also my friend and colleague Joseph Grima spoke to us about today. Openness means extroversion, altruism, it means generosity, it also means transparency. And this project is one of the most incredible examples of it. This project is called the iWriter. It's a project that is completely open source. You can all redo it. You just need to learn a little programming and to buy some glasses and to buy a computer camera, and you can do it yourself. And it's a project that helped a graffiti artist in Los Angeles that became completely paralyzed because he got ALS to tag a building in downtown LA again using only his pupils. I will not go into details because of time, but I urge you to go and see it online. It's the example that I always use when I have to explain to people that do not know what the open source concept is. I use it to explain that open source is about sharing the knowledge, because ultimately it's not about money, it's about making people's lives better, and money will come back. But the new normal is not anymore. Some people say the new normal is about lowering your expectations, at least financially. As far as I'm concerned, the new normal is about elevating your expectations of sharing a better life through technology and through design. Of course, open source sometimes also means trying to thinkering is this beautiful term which means thinking with your hands. It's about crafts and experimentation, and it was invented by John Seeley Brown, who was the director of a laboratory called Xerox PARC in the 1980s. It's about just using your hands to invent a new way of thinking, and it doesn't necessarily have to be high-tech. This is the work of Martino Gamper, who's an Italian designer living in London, that did this experiment. He did 100 chairs in 100 days using only stuff that he found in the streets of London. Every day, a new little monster that you could sit on that came to be a population and a whole family of chairs. Design today sometimes has to be deeply ironic, and it's about the irony that helps you reveal new directions for the future. I find this more than ironic, very deeply ironic. It's a beautiful project by a student from the RCA in London. It's a contraption that enables one to feel the strength and the brunt of a lightning striking from the sky without dying. It just gives you enough distance and insulation not to die, but boy, you're gonna feel the lightning. And it's about this kind of amazing ideas that sometimes make me love design more. And this is instead very intimate, very subtle, but equally revealing. It's a website about typefaces that's transformed into a book. So the reverse of what we usually do. You go from website to books, and all the hyperlinks are shown with red thread. So all of a sudden you have this manifestation of hyperlinks, of the whole concept of the internet that is very poetic. It's almost art, but still it's designed because the designer says so. This is another interesting differentiation. Design is first and foremost almost always political, and we need to start thinking of politics as they used to be many centuries ago. Political is everything that goes beyond the nucleus of the family. Every time we start interacting in a neighborhood, it's already politics. In a building, it's already politics, and we should all be aware of that. Political can be very overt. This website is from 2004. I really love it. It was the first time that politicians and corporate people in the United States got shivers down their spine when they realized the power of the internet. It was a way to connect all of the corporate boards in the United States between themselves and with different entities in the government. So all of a sudden you could understand the conflicts of interest. You could visualize them. You could type the name of a chairman of a company and see whom he was in another board with that was also on the government. So it was very powerful. And it remains 2004 because Josh On, the designer, who's actually from Future Farmers, and yesterday we were looking at his work, didn't update it or updated it in a different way, but it was like elegant, clear, and really politically powerful, as is this old-fashioned way of being political. You know, politics still has its own language and its own iconic status, and these are some posters that were done during Occupy Wall Street a year and a half ago. First and foremost, design has to be visionary today. It has to really try to make us think in a broader way. That sometimes it doesn't have to work. This is the fifth dimensional camera by Anab Jain, which is an attempt to explain the theory of the many universes, which we should all try to understand, because I think we're going to get there quite soon. Of course, it's just a demonstration. It's almost a visualization design. And for those of you who have seen Fringe or have seen Sliding Doors, it's very simple. It's about thinking of many parallel universes where slight different chances and slight differentiations in options and in choices lead in completely different directions. But it's a powerful thing when you see it in this strange kind of camera. Visionary means also sticking with reality and helping others move beyond their current obstacle. There's a lot of collaboration going on between designers and scientists. Scientists love designers because with designers they can take freedom, they can have license, they can have some margins of experimentation without being subject to the scrutiny of peer review in the scientific world. They just, especially at the Imperial College in London, the collaboration once again with the RCA is ongoing and really interesting. And the work of this designer, Revital Cohen, is emblematic. This in particular is an experiment that she's conducting with a neuroscientist in Chicago and one at Imperial College that are postulating that instead of curating ghost limb syndrome, the syndrome that makes an amputee feel the limb, even the pain, as if it were still there, instead of curating it by making it disappear, which is the common practice today, one should harness that feeling in the hope and in the attempt to regrow nerve terminals so as to be able to attach a more efficient prosthesis. It's true biomechatronics. This is a collaboration that goes on, and designers in this case provide the human element. Designers know what human beings need and how they want to live. Humanitarian design is also a very broad category and an ambiguous one. There's no right way to define it. Humanitarian, but it's also altruistic, generous, it's simply extrovert. Humanitarian, if you wish, is a little condescending, and we need to find a better way to talk about it. But it's design that has to deal with emergency situations, that is supposed to uplift the life of people that are in real trouble. This beautiful piece is by a young Afghani designer, Masood Hassani, and it comes from his own experience as a child living in Afghanistan in a zone with a lot of minefields. It is a dandelion, a rolling big ball that is powered by the wind and that can be set free onto a minefield so that it can lead mines to explode. And you see here, we just entered it in the MoMA collection, you see here Masood working with the Dutch army to actually test it, because he lives in the Netherlands right now. Humanitarian design also means learning from your mistakes and understanding the power of local experimentation versus global. This is the work of Project H, two young designers from the United States who started out thinking that they could improve the hippo roller, which is top left, which is an instrument that's been implemented in Africa to help women and children carry water from miles away to their village. And then soon they realized that they couldn't work in Africa from San Francisco, actually from Moon Bay, because you need to be on place to be able to really understand what's happening. So they instead moved to South Carolina, and they worked for a year with the community there and came up with a new farmers market stand and a chicken coop. And they were really considering that an enormous success. So sometimes it's about deciding where your field of action will be and being completely mindful of it. Responsible is also an important characteristic for contemporary design. This is a Wonder Water Cafe that was installed at the Beijing Design Week 2 years ago. It was a cafe in which the menu, each item in the menu had the water footprint marked on. So you kind of were reminded of the water footprint of anything you were eating. It might seem a little oppressive at first, but we need more education so that we can make better choices in the future. Responsible design might also mean being completely crafty and recuperating some old techniques. This is the work of Forma Fantasma, two Italian designers living in the Netherlands, who studied organic resins from the beginning of the 20th century and before that were much more biodegradable and environmentally responsible than contemporary resins, and showed with beautiful vessels how old resins could be actually cooked. They were doing these cooking classes to show people how to use these resins. So it's about demonstrating the wisdom of the past with the possibilities of the future. Sensitive design is about understanding that people, once again, need to continue mourning, need to continue rejoicing, need to continue being people. And the work of the Eindhoven School of Design and RCA, Eindhoven Academy, and of RCA about the subject of death is, in my opinion, exemplary. It's not easy to talk about death, but the Dutch students, the students at the Dutch Academy in Eindhoven have done it more than once with an exhibition in 2006 that was all devoted to death, and more recently with these amazing coffins, little coffins for stillborn babies, because before 24 weeks of gestation, babies are not considered, do not get a funeral in the Netherlands, but sometimes parents might want to mourn and have their own rituals. So this designer made all these different coffins of different sizes that can help parents mourn and go through this difficult moment. Similarly, a designer in London thought of these beautiful digital urns. That's called digital remains. And it's based on the idea that when we pass away today, when we die, we leave behind not only material goods, we also leave behind our computer. We leave behind all of our pictures, our music, all of our calendars. And why shouldn't that have as representative and symbolic an urn as our ashes or as our tomb? So this is a little hard drive that's perfectly crafted in wood that you can fix, you can put all of your stuff on. Hopefully you're going to have enough time to hide what needs to be hidden, so you prepare everything and it goes in there. And after you pass, your loved ones can place it next to their computer, and by Bluetooth connection, your desktop will appear. Sensibility is also quite important, sensitive and sensible. And this is the example of the Jugaad kind of innovation that Divya was talking about today, the idea of being frugal, economical, sensible, and using what's available and making the best that you can with the tools at your disposal. This is a Guatemalan company that was called Maya Pedal. That was all about making any kind of equipment from dishwashers to generators using pieces of bicycles and everything human-powered, of course. And sensible is also understanding that you have to sometimes let go of your ego. Many of the designers that we admire today are designers that are able to show their talent, to show their prowess by subjugating their own ego to the needs of others. This is the work of Elemental, which is an architectural company in Chile that basically provides blank house canvas for people that get a one-time only loan from the state to buy their own house. These are basic homes that people can buy, and then they can add lodges, balconies, they can make them into their own and grow them into a community. So it's about seeding a community. We see, therefore, that it's important that the characteristic of design today, the criteria by which we judge the soundness of design, are not really connected to geography. It's not about Italian design or Hong Kong design. It's about how any kind of design fits in the world. It's about whether any object or interface or interaction or system adds something to the world without wasting its energy and resources and without wasting our time. And if we have to burn a few more chairs like Mendini did in 1970s to get there, well, we shall. Thank you very much.